let's go over to the Details tab. Now, the Details tab is divided into two sections, sharpening and its opposite, noise reduction. I say that because noise reduction actually blurs your information as opposed to sharpening the information. I'm going to start with sharpening our images. By default, our images get a small amount of sharpening as soon as we open our images in Camera Raw. As you can see, right in here, we have an amount of 25. By default, we have no noise reduction. So I'm just going to talk about the sharpening at this point in time. Now, this default amount here is an appropriate amount for your camera make, model, and sensor. Even if we never click on the details, sharpening gets applied anyways. In my opinion, there are 3 stages of sharpening, and the first and last are absolutes. The first one being capture sharpening, done here. This compensates for the anti-aliasing filter that is in your camera that seems to smooth things out. So we need to compensate for that by applying some sharpening at this point in time. The second round of sharpening is optional, and that is known as creative sharpening. And you can do that if you decided that you wanted to enhance an area in your image and make it stand out. Now, you can also blur part of your image, and that's kind of considered creative sharpening because you're drawing the attention of your viewer to a certain area by blurring it or possibly sharpening it. And the third stage of sharpening is always done at the end before you press print, and that is to compensate for pixels being translated into ink dots on paper. I have a whole thing on sharpening in my advanced Photoshop. We can get into it at that point in time. Just know that this value here is a starting point. Now, in order to actually see what's going on with your sharpening, you'll have to be at 100% view. That way you get to see what's really going on. The next thing I want to talk about with respects to sharpening is what's actually going on. What we're doing when we're sharpening is we're increasing the contrast at edges. We're making our lights lighter and our darks darker. By doing that, we're giving the visual appearance of an image that is much sharper. What do? How do we go about doing it? Sharpening in Adobe Camera Raw uses 4 variables. You can see them, they're right there. The amount slider, the radius slider, the detail, and the masking. In order to see the effects of sharpening, we must be viewing our images at 100%. We need to see 1 pixel for every screen pixel. So, in order to do that, I'm just going to come down here and click on this to get me to 100%. I'm going to come over here and grab the hand tool, which will allow me to click, hold, and drag and bring up this part of the image inside. So this way we can see what's going on in the sky, we can see what's going on with the wheel, some of the paint, and some of the metal as we go through our sharpening process. So here we are seeing our image at 100% view. I have chosen this portion because of the surface details and all that other stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the amount slider, just so you get an idea of what's going on with this. I'm just going to move the amount slider all the way up to 100. Can you see the detail that's showing up in here? So now that we have our image in 100% view in the sharpen dialog, I'm going to take these sliders and move them around to show you how sharpening works in Camera Raw. Once you find a specific set of slider positions that seem to work with a specific camera or a specific lens, you can save this as a preset. And then you can apply that en masse without having to come in and move these sliders around for each and every one of your images. The whole idea of what I'm trying to get across here when I'm teaching you about the Camera Raw dialog box is I'm going in and talking about each one of these little components in detail so you actually understand what's going on. But the idea is, at the end of the game, to actually have a preset of a bunch of things that you commonly apply to your images over and over again. If we have them as presets, then we don't have to spend a lot of time going through each image. So here's our sharpening at 100% view. We have the default, which is 25. If I was to turn that off, you're really not going to see a lot of difference, but if I click on the preview, I think you can. If you take a look here or take a look there, I think you'll see there's a difference. Sharper, not sharper. So I've got it at 0. 25 is the default. What I'm going to do is I'm going to whack it all the way up to 150. Now you can see all that crunchy detail. Turn that off. We're back down, and now we come back into here, and there it is. Okay, it's a little bit too much, but I need to show you how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back to 25. Now, the thing I need to stress to you is the amount slider is like your volume control. The radius slider is what creates that little halo, that visible halo that we see, which is created by the increase in contrast at, edges and all that kind of stuff. If I were to raise this up to this value and then take the radius value, which is right now at 1, and I think if you look really close, you're going to see that little halo right across here where there's the dark teal, and then we hit the sky, where you have the edge of the gray building and we hit the sky. You see that little radius. I'm going to raise this up to its maximum in Camera Raw, which is only 3 pixels. Now do you see how much bigger that is? So what I'm getting at is when we increase the amount, everything is more obvious. Put it back to 1.0, it's still obvious. Now, it's not going to be that obvious when we press print, but it's still obvious in here. Now, rule of thumb is when you increase the amount, you should theoretically decrease the size of the radius. So I'm going to just bring this down to about maybe 0.7 at 150. Now, I'm not going to leave it at 150. That's ridiculous. But I'm going to just leave it there so we can go through the process of understanding what's going on. As far as detail is concerned, I may or may not play around with this. I'm not 100% sure. And the masking is very, very cool. Okay. So what I'm going to do to show you what's going on, the effects of all of this kind of stuff, is I'm going to hold down the Option key when I click on the radius. So I'm going to put this back to 1.0, and then when I click on this, actually, when I click on this for the amount, you can see that our image goes into grayscale. And that, I believe, is because we don't necessarily need to, first of all, we don't necessarily need to see all the color as a distraction, but also the sharpening is only being applied to the grayscale component of the image and not the color component of the image. Don't forget, when we're sharpening, we're increasing contrast. When you increase contrast, you tend to oversaturate. So that's why we're only sharpening the grayscale aspect of things.